All right, I thought that I would go over my fertility testing just in case some of you have fertility concerns. I know that it can be scary or maybe just a little, it's kind of the unknown, right? And so I wanted to be as helpful as possible for those of you who are maybe thinking you might have to pursue this route at some point. So what I'm going to do is go over my history a little bit just to give you a better picture of that. And then I'm going to go over the actual full month of fertility testing and what that looked like. And then I'll answer maybe some more common questions from Instagram at the very end of the video. So to start off, the reason that I initially went in to pursue more fertility testing was so originally last August in 2019, I was diagnosed with PCOS. A little bit before that, I had noticed my periods were like 40 to 48 days apart, which is not necessarily normal. If your periods are around 28, 27, 26, maybe 25, maybe to 35 days apart, then that would be considered normal, but anything above 35 days is not normal. And it was obviously very hard to track ovulation. If your periods are that far apart, then you don't really know if you're ovulating or when you're ovulating. If you have a 28-day period, then you're likely ovulating on day 14, and that's kind of like the normal. But everyone has a different normal, so don't always go by like, oh, I ovulate on day 14 just because that's what a book says. It's different for everyone. So being that I had such periods that were far apart, I was like, I don't know how I'm supposed to get pregnant if I can't track anything. And so I went into an OBGYN at that point. She looked at the blood work that I brought in. I had blood work done, like a full women's hormone panel, and I had one high level and everything else was fine. And then she looked at that. She looked at maybe like some of my other symptoms, which were the periods being far apart and irregular. And she said, I think you have PCOS, which I was floored and shocked by just because I didn't see myself as a typical PCOS case. Most of the women that I know have like facial hair, they have really bad acne, they're overweight, so I wasn't your classic PCOS case. And so then we needed one more basically symptom to solidify that I had PCOS. So they need 3 markers. Usually that's going to be that you have irregular periods, that you do in fact have multiple cysts in your ovaries, and I'll go over that in a second, and then irregular hormones. And you might have more symptoms than that, but that's what they have to use for PCOS. So if someone's diagnosing you with PCOS and they don't have like the full 3 markers, don't accept your diagnosis. I did have all 3 markers. So I went in for my ultrasound for that. I was diagnosed with PCOS based on the fact that I had multiple cysts. Now these cysts are not what you think of when you think of cysts. These cysts were basically, you have follicles that release an egg every month, and that's ovulation, right? And I have an abundance of follicles. Mostly what you want to see when you look at someone's ovaries is like 8 to 15 follicles, but I have like 20 plus. And so that is where this word cystic comes from. It's not true large cysts that burst and are painful. There's just extra cysts or follicles in your ovaries. So they're not painful, and I had no other symptoms. So anyway, I spent the last year since my diagnosis in August of 2019, I spent the last year not taking any medications. They had prescribed metformin and birth control, and I was not going to do that. I regulated my period through lifestyle changes, and I can go over that at some other point. But after a full year of, not getting pregnant, doing those things and tracking everything, I was like, okay, I need to go in. I need to know more information. So that's where I was on basically June 1st. So June 1st, I went into my very first appointment. And, well, I guess it was end of May. I went into my very first appointment to New Leaders in Fertility. So that's in Panama City, Florida, and they have different locations. I found them just through someone I know. They said Dr. Rips was a good physician and they were local, so I wasn't, I didn't want to travel, and sometimes you do have to travel for a good physician. But anyway, found that, and I was very pleased with my first appointment. They explained everything very well. Basically, they educate you on like what your cycle is, and they go over what the testing is going to be like, and if you're an appropriate candidate, and they talk about pricing. So that first appointment, I think cost me $200, and I was happy to pay that. I was fine. And I mean, basically they really wanted to know if I was a good candidate, and being that I had tracked everything for an entire year, I had a previous diagnosis of PCOS and had clearly had issues getting pregnant, then I was a good candidate. Just so you guys know, I have not taken birth control for like maybe 5 or 6 years. I was on the pill maybe when I was younger, and then my last round of birth control was like an IUD with no hormones. So that was not really a conflicting issue for some of you guys wondering. But I would say that if you have not looked into tracking things, maybe, tracking things like your period, obviously, trying to see if you are ovulating using testing strips. I got mine on Amazon. It's like a big 100-pack that I'll link below for you guys. And maybe tracking basal body temperature, all those things, and doing it the right way. A really good book that I read was Taking Charge of Your Fertility, and that kind of explains all the things that you should look for when you're trying to conceive or maybe trying not to conceive. And that book was very, very helpful. And if you're not tracking those things, or trying to get pregnant for a good like 6 months to a year, then I would say you're maybe not a good candidate to just like go in to get fertility testing. Usually they reserve it for, okay, it's pretty clear that you have issues. I mean, I'm sure they would see you if you did just have concerns, but yeah, I would try at least first to track everything on your own and get pregnant on your own. So let's talk about pricing. I had a Christian healthcare plan. Obviously that is not going to cover fertility testing. And neither does really regular insurance. If you guys know of an insurance plan that does cover fertility, comment below, because most don't, and therefore you're paying out of pocket. Now, New Leaders in Fertility offered me what's called their global package. I have it right here, and it was $1,950.30. You pay it like that day, and that includes pretty much all of the testing. There were a couple tests that they had to send out to Quest Labs, and I had to pay for those. So all in all, I was looking at paying about $2,700. Granted, I did use Ulta Labs to order my own labs just because it's cheaper. So if you have questions about that, let me know, because it's way cheaper to do it that way versus just letting them order it to Quest. But yes, all in all, $2,700. Now it might be different at other facilities. Might be different depending on if your insurance covers something. Maybe it'll cover some routine labs, and that does happen. But for me, this is the price that I paid. So this global package was at a 30% discount. Basically, they're saying if you're going to pay this all in one lump sum, then you get a discount. And so I was happy to pay that. Now let's talk about what the process actually looked like. So they are looking at your period or your cycle, your entire month cycle from the start of your period to the start of your next period. And that for me was over 30 days. So that's what that looked like. For you, it might be 28 days. And so it just varies per person. But essentially you call on the day of your first period, and they want to see you in on days between 2 and 4, and they'll go in and do an intrauterine ultrasound, and they are looking at your egg count or your follicle count. You also have to get blood work at that time, so they're looking at hormone levels. Essentially, I'm not going to go like in super depth, but hormone levels, just to make sure that everything looks good at that time in the month. And The other things that they have to do is basically federally mandated. They have to get blood work done to see if you have like STDs, to see if you, so like rubella, varicella, vitamin D they need to look at. You can choose to do a genetic carrier screening, so to see if Brad or I have any genetic predisposition to a disability or something like that, just because they want to know all of those things just in case you do move forward with fertility testing, or sorry, with fertility treatments to have a baby. They want to make sure that that baby's going to be as healthy as possible. Let's see. After that appointment, so that's the first day of your period, and I know that's kind of weird to like have an ultrasound, something shoved up your vag during your period, but it wasn't that bad, I promise. And then what happens is, for me, because I wasn't even sure if I was ovulating, they want to do another ultrasound right before you ovulate. So usually that looks like on cycle day like 6 through 12, they're going to do another intrauterine ultrasound. What they are also going to do is they are also going to test some more hormones mid-month just to make sure your hormones are at the right level. So they change through the month. I know you guys kind of had that concept, but testosterone, LH levels, progesterone, estrogen, all of those like fluctuate and change. And if you're like the perfect human who is going to get pregnant, they'll be flowing the way they should be. If you're not, like myself, they're not gonna flow the way that they should throughout the month, which is why you don't ovulate and why maybe you have irregular periods. At some point in the month too, your husband or partner will get a semen analysis and they'll check that out. The male also has to do the basic federally mandated blood work so that they know, like, you know, you're not carrying anything that could harm the baby. The very last thing that happens in the month is you call them when your next period starts. For me, mine was a little off and they weren't very surprised. And so we kind of like skipped this part, not skipped this part. We still did the blood work, but my period hadn't started yet. And so for you, if you have a normal period, then you would just call them on the start of your next period and you would do blood work to see what your levels were at. They're basically like checking to see if you ovulated. You'll also go in for an ultrasound to see if you ovulated. So basically you have beginning, middle, and end blood work, ultrasounds. Mid-luteal is to see if you have open tubes. So yeah, that's really it. After they have all that information, you have one last appointment and you kind of talk about what the doctor thinks your particular treatment plan is. You know, for us, I'm not going to go into details, but for us, we feel pretty good about our plan. We are not really interested in like IVF or IUI, which was definitely an option for us, but there's some things to try before that. Things like Clomid, if you are not ovulating, they can help you ovulate. Overall, I highly recommend if you are scared or nervous about your own fertility and it's pretty clear that you have issues, I would say go in if you have the budget for it, and go in if you do have true concerns. I kind of wish that I did it earlier, just because I know a lot now about my body, and I thought I knew a lot before, but now I like really, really know, and I can be confident in moving forward. I'm going to go ahead and answer some common questions from you guys. Somebody asked, were there any specific things that I was looking for? And honestly, I was just hoping to hear that I didn't have PCOS anymore, just because I had worked so hard to combat my hormone issues. That wasn't really necessarily the case, so that was a little bit disappointing, but again, I'm kind of just like right back where I was. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's a roller coaster. I think if you have fertility issues, you definitely can relate. Some days you're going to feel like awesome and you're like, you know, everything's great, God has a plan, and other days you're like, why me? So that's just the way it goes. Was it painful? The only thing that was uncomfortable was that hysteroscope where they go into your cervix. It's a lot like getting an IUD placed. Someone asked, how do you even begin? And obviously you will want to talk to your partner about, do you want to have babies? When do you want to start? And I would say comfortably, if you are not successful in getting pregnant after really like tracking your ovulation, because you need to ovulate in order to get pregnant, and you want to have sex during your ovulation so that you can get pregnant, fertilize that egg. If you have not been successful, I would say it's like 6 to 12 months. I mean, they say wait a year, but like sometimes if you know or you feel like something's wrong, go in at 8 months. That's my advice. Somebody asked, how did you know you needed further testing and did you have to request it? So typically you can reach out to your OBGYN and say, hey, I think I need more help and more testing, and they might refer you to, you know, a clinic or a fertility specialist. I just found mine on my own. I had only seen my OBGYN once, and we don't have really a strong relationship, so I just felt like pursuing it on my own. One of the things that was really interesting is I didn't really get to see the physician until that final appointment. And so up to that point, I was working with what I think is a nurse practitioner. So I think that's typically how it works. You're going to work with and see other professionals, and that final appointment is when you sit down with the actual fertility specialist. How long were we trying? I would say that we were definitely like not careful at all since we got married, which was about 2 years ago. And then really started like trying last spring. So it's been almost 1.5 years, I would say. I think that's pretty much it. I went through a lot of information, so I'm sorry if it seemed a little bit like mundane, but it is what it is. This is fertility testing. It's not super lively. When I did my last appointment, that very last appointment, Brad went to that one with me. Otherwise, he didn't go with me at all to anything else. They did kind of give me like lifestyle things to do, which I felt was really nice, just because usually when you are looking at modern medicine, they're always wanting to prescribe things, and I thought it was really nice that, you know, here are some supplements that you might want to take. Here are some lifestyle changes that you might want to make. So we have a plan. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm hopeful that maybe someday we'll adopt. So you never know with the Bromlows what you're gonna get. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please let me know if you have any questions. If you really have specific questions, definitely just email me, because Instagram DMs get really full. But you can comment too below, and I hope you guys have a really great day. You're worth it.